And so we put a reasonably tight number on the architect, and so she understood that money did matter. It wasn't a carte blanche at all. And that got her thinking in terms of how do I make something that's nice and interesting and architectural, but is not unnecessarily expensive.
So yeah, onto that point of collaboration, it sounds like it was a really lovely collaborative process for you where you felt very involved and heard and had a design professional who was really receptive to your feedback, and that the research and work that you'd done to get yourself prepared, plus to really interrogate how you needed the house to perform, that there was a platform for that to be discussed and an openness for that to be embraced in how the design was coming to fruition. Was that sort of your general feeling and experience in that?
Yes, absolutely. It was, and it was an enjoyable process. It wasn't, and one of the things that's taken enormous stress off us is we can stay in this house till the other one's finished. So sort of, time's a bit important to us, but quality was really important to us, and we could invest the time in and the patience in doing that. Though we were both saying, had we been in our previous full-time careers, I can't imagine being up in my capacity to do this.
And that's an issue that both the architect and the builder mentioned, is that often their clients are working and they'll pose a question that's time critical, and the clients will never get back to them because they're just busy taking kids to daycare or what have you. And they appreciated the fact that we regarded this as the number one priority and had the ability to do that. We weren't too distracted by other things.
No, so, and reasonably decisive.
Yes, decisive and rapid, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does help. So, and I think it's that understanding that you actually have to dedicate time, attention, and effort to this as a project. You actually have to park it as a kind of a thing. And I mean, we talk a lot about people saying that they don't have enough time. And when you say I don't have enough time, it generally means that it's not your priority right now, because you know that you'll make time for the things that are your priorities. So you'll manufacture time if you need to. So it's not linear. So it's really interesting. I think that yes, I imagine that your lifestyles where you're at in this point in time in your life did accommodate that, perhaps with a little bit more ease. And if you had little children running around and, both working very busy or very, very full demanding careers and that kind of stuff. But still, I think it's that understanding that people need to know, if you are planning on building or renovating your house, it is going to take time, and the time is going to happen whether, those decisions are going to need to be made whether you're making them or not. And so if you do want to be involved in those decisions, then you need to kind of actually make space for this in your life. So now, can I talk quickly about your budget and your expectations around that? How did budget management look like during the design? You talked about the involvement of the builder. I'm curious how, as you were working through these iterations of design, how you kind of went about setting your budget, and then what that looked like in terms of managing it as the design started to be brought to fruition.
So I guess, helicopter sense, we bought the block, and the block had an associated unimproved value. And so the first question was, is the block good value? And we didn't pay much more than the unimproved value, so that was a tick. And then a friend of ours who was very keen on home building said, you shouldn't spend less than the unimproved value on your build, because otherwise you're wasting what's going on. So it sort of gave us a number. And so we put a reasonably tight number on the architect, and so she understood that money did matter. It wasn't a carte blanche at all. And that got her thinking in terms of how do I make something that's nice and interesting and architectural, but is not unnecessarily expensive. So there are no curved walls, for instance, and things like that. The price per square metre that we were given by the builder at the start, when not on our design, but he said in general, the price per square metre is X. And that's pretty much what he's come in at. And so that was okay as well. The number that we signed up to in the contract was arguably quite a bit more than when we started this whole process we thought we might be spending. But it was consistent with those criteria. And at this stage, and we're at the sheeting stage, They're about 1% over budget.
And when we asked them at the beginning, they said they usually ran within 3%. So
isn't that fantastic that they're tracking that and they're able to let you know that, and that it's
oh,
also showing in the way that they're doing
They're
yes.
very, very good at tracking. We have a Gantt chart for the schedule, although that's not
Yay.
updated very regularly, but we know what the steps are. But every month we get the invoice, and it might be 50 pages, and that's a very large spreadsheet of costs, cost to complete, expected completed cost on, say 200 items. And we get all the invoices, all the timesheets, because it's a cost plus fixed fee deal. So we get to see all their costs, and then their management fee, which is fixed for 11 months. So if they run over 11 months, they're paying their own management fee. So the architect looked and gave us advice on the bids that we got. And there isn't such a thing really as a fixed price building contract anymore, because the uncertainties, particularly post-COVID, are just too great. And she looked at an example from the other builder we were seriously considering, and was a bit aghast that really, while it was called fixed cost, it wasn't fixed. There were a lot of stuff that was contingencies. And the scary part about that in that client's case was that, for instance, the trusses, there was an amount for the trusses. Now, if the amount came in above that amount, the client was paying the extra amount, obviously, but they were paying the 27% builder's contingency because the price had changed, despite the fact the scope hadn't changed. So that was a bit of a nasty shock. So we felt that this cost plus fixed fee was good for a couple of reasons. It's very transparent, and our sister-in-law have been very happy with how that had worked. And the other thing is, of course, that a builder in that situation can only be stiffed by a client for 1 month's payment. So we felt we were in a much safer position if the builder was being given a hard time by another client. They were only out by a month's cash flow on one job. So the risk to us was much less.
And by the time they got a deposit, they're actually not out.
Yes.
Yeah. But we did look for a business model that we really thought our biggest risk was a builder going under. And so we looked for a business model that looked like they were very safe. And we just liked the certainty of this, of their business model. But just to add, in terms of managing costs during the design phase, was Wendy would, particularly as the house, as they do, as you often tell us, is bigger than we anticipated. So she'd keep on saying, now you realise there's a cost implication here. But in addition to the curves, she also had softer structures, so spotted gum above all the windows versus brick and the other things to minimise construction costs. And there were a number of things she did like that, and the roof design, which everybody put a lot of effort into because we were paranoid about black mold.
And I was just laughing at your comments on podcasts about driving around seeing badly done gabled roofs.
Yes.
These are
tell me more about the roof design, because you've mentioned that a couple of times. So tell me more about that.
So it's 3 flat roofs. One slopes to the east, one slopes to the south, one slopes to the north. Now, I'm from Broken Hill originally, the Silver City. It was called the Silver City because it had corrugated iron roofs. It wasn't because it was a silver lead and zinc mining town. And so we went with galvanized iron as a sort of throwback to that. And it works well with the spotted gum and the recycled bricks. So they're all simple. They're all flat. They all run into...
Well, they're sloped, yeah.
Well, they're sloped, but yeah. There are no angles in them. They all run into big oversized gutters. They're 250mm diameter gutters that look really nice. They're galvanized, and then big galvanized downpipes. Within the roof space, they put a lot of effort into figuring out, how do we make it energy efficient? How do we control the moisture? And they took themselves off to...
both the builders and the architects went to additional training courses.
I love it. I love it.
People like ProClimber.
Yes.
With one of the local people who provides ProClimber, a company called Laros. And they work with Powerhouse on this. And when they decided that they had it nailed, literally, the builder Parry took me up on the scaffold, much to Fiona's horror, and that showed me the where the insulation was, where the proclimer was, or the membrane was, where the air was flowing, where the gratings at the top and bottom were, where the counter battens were. He was very, very happy. And on that visit, we got one of the contractors that works with Powerhouse up on the scaffold as well. While he was doing a walk around, it was
one of our quality control points.
Checkpoints, yeah. He was doing a walk around to look at the cladding and the membrane work, and he was very happy with what was done. And he was particularly happy about the sliding doors, because sliding doors are always a potential problem unless you've thought them through. They're just a direct leak out if you're careless. But he was very happy with the roof, and his comment was, well, I'm just going to go up the road to the builders building that $6 million house up the road and tell them that
the passive house design.
Yes, passive house place up the road, and tell them that you've got a much better roof here. And I think he was stirring. But I think it also said that he was very happy with the thought and the thought into the design, and also the quality of the build that the builders were achieving.
And both the Wendy architect and Parry our builder said, having nailed that roof design, that will be their default setting now. So
yes.
So
they've now got a library of parts. Isn't that great? Because this is the thing. I mean, we talk about it inside home method. Flat roofs are challenging. They're particularly challenging for a condensation mitigation point of view, and they do need to be detailed in a really specific way. And your designer and builder both need to know that before you commit to a particular height or a particular pitch, because getting the layers right can mean that the roof can be a lot fatter than if you just assumed a structural profile. To be able to get that ventilation cavity, to be able to get the insulation working, figuring out where the building, where the line of the building envelope is and where that thermal barrier is and all of those kinds of things. And so I absolutely love hearing that these professionals that you were working with knew that this was going to be a thing that they had to solve and a challenge that they had to embrace, and the fact that they upskilled themselves in that way. I mean, I can imagine as clients you were kind of going, actually, this really heartens me. This really helps us feel that we can, really, what is the word? Builds trust that they've got us, that they're in
absolutely.
our corner. Yeah.
And just so professional. So that was, and one of the things when Wendy first designed it too, it was fitting in the air conditioning and I always get the initials wrong, MHRV.
Yeah.
MHRV. Yes. And we had also, and I think our builder was just sort of thinking, did we need that or not? And we just decided we did. So I think that took some complexity out for everyone too. We just
made the commitment early. Yep.
Made the commitment early, but designing to get all the pipes through.
Yes.
Yes,
it's quite tricky.
Wendy was very concerned that the MHRV piping could go through the ceiling space of the two links. She worried a lot about that.
Yes.
But,
So that, and the other, I guess, emerging thing in terms of the new building standards was we wanted absolutely flat thresholds, and we wanted a well-sealed house. So when we first got the, there was a lot of flurry around balancing water management, termites and flat, but we wanted raven seals on the doors, and none of the door people at that point, other than one Wendy had found, knew how to do that design with it flat, because they always wanted that little lip, like it was a window. And then Parry, our builder, figured out the detail on that design, and then within the 2 months between the windows being ordered and us signing, he went and talked to his favourite supplier, and they all worked out they now have to figure out how to do that because of the new building standards.
So he's upskilling the supplier as well. That's amazing.
Yes, and the main thing he wanted was the raven seal to drop down versus pop up, because he just thought that was lower risk. But him having that conversation took our window price down by $30,000.
Oh, wow.
Because he could get a local supplier that he was very happy with, and he got them to sketch up what they do and then compared it to the other quotes we've got, and it was exactly the same solution.
Gosh, oh, literally just so many green flags with these professionals. And I think what's really interesting is I know working with builders and also speaking to architects and designers, there can be a fear that if they can't sit with you and go, yeah, I know how to do that, that you will see a hole in their professionalism or their abilities. And it's such the opposite end. The fact that they were like, no, we don't know about this yet, but we're going to go and learn about it. And we understand that the industry changes and learns all the time as well. And then we're going to take other people on the journey with us because the project here is the ultimate goal, getting the best outcome for this project. To me, I can see how that has just really shaped your relationship with them and had instilled a lot of confidence in their abilities. You've not looked at it and gone, well, why don't you know this? You've looked at it and gone, oh, this is awesome. They're learning. They're improving themselves. And they're bringing other people along on the journey with them. So, and I also thought it was really interesting that you pointed out the budget management. I do find that designers who've had a background in commercial, often which can have very different budget metrics to a residential project. And often anything has to be really value managed from a design point of view. So decisions like, let's not put heavy weight over the openings. Let's make sure that that's lightweight so that we're, and some really rational economic decisions that are just really commonplace in commercial projects, but don't necessarily filter into residential. It's great that Wendy was able to bring that cross-disciplinary experience into your project to really maximise the potential of your budget overall in terms of the design outcomes.
Yeah, no, it's a really, we're very happy with how it looks. So no, that was good. And just to emphasise, both Wendy, but our builders are very experienced. They've been in business for 20 years. And they've got a wealth of experience they've brought, but you just so often hear the phrase, well, I always like to learn something else, So
I love it. Yeah.
We didn't feel we were anyway in inexperienced hands because they were always keeping themselves up to date. And I guess treated professional development in the way you would expect any other profession to do.
Yes.
We've all got our sort of 20 hours a year that we have to do extra and those sorts of things. And it was just that was quite a delight.
Yeah, really heartening.
Builders involved in education for apprentices and builders with the professional body,
yes,
MBA or whichever he is involved in.
Yes.
So there's that running through the whole thing.
Yeah.
How fantastic.
Professionalism. That's
nice.
Yeah.
Next time when you come back, I really want to dive into the construction part of it and working with the builder. But can you just tell me, for the purpose of this conversation, when did the builder get involved in the project? Like, what was the timeline that you actually committed to that builder?
So we've got to put those dates somewhere. And we did have the wrong one on there. So we started a conversation with them in fact, almost before we bought the block, I think, but with two builders. And then when we got to development approval, we had another formal round of conversations. But because Sonda had an existing relationship with them, there were a few bits and pieces they kind of checked in with them on. And then we gave it to the three development approval. I think we gave it to the three potential builders. And in each case, we had a meeting with them to walk them through the plans. And then we had a meeting with them for feedback and their costing so we could get some design input at that point. And then as we were getting close to building approval, we had another round of detailed meetings with two of them, and the people who were trying to do the in-house design and build got knocked out at that stage because they kept on wanting us to overcommit to them to even finalise pricing, and we just said, well, we'll just see how the other two go then. So it then came down to two, and we honestly would have loved to have hired both of them at one level. But when we got to references, Pickleman's just walked on water in terms of their clients. So people,
and now you can see why, hey?
People had done multiple builds with them. They just had a wealth of people, and the other builder had good references, but one of them was, oh, look, absolutely lovely, but I'm not quite sure where my budget's up to.
Okay.
That kind of thing. And They were, however, mainly because of the project management fee, 20% more than the other builder. But when we looked at fixed price isn't really fixed price, and the cost of builders margins, if we found something we wanted to iterate in, I always think of the bit when the builder comes in as detailed design versus conceptual design.
Yeah.
We just thought we think they're worth that. So
Yes.
that's the way we went. And we have found, for example, we have done some upgrades. Notably, I didn't listen to Ed carefully enough on how much he hates engineered floors. So we had contingency money set aside, so we upgraded when that wasn't needed at the beginning.
And the reason for that is that because we had such good project cost visibility, and they were well within margin, we got to a point where the frame was up, so a lot of the risks like excavation and so on risks had gone. So we figured you're on budget at the moment. The likelihood of you going well off budget is not great. Therefore, we know we can afford to think about upgrades within that contingency. And so at one point I sat him down and said, "Oh, Perry, I'm thinking about hardwood floors." And there was this look of such relief and gratitude. Oh, thank God. So he didn't want to do engineered floors, but he hadn't complained about it.
Yeah.
And a good example was he didn't like the oversized guttering that Wendy had proposed, and Parry's originally a plumber, but he didn't complain. He put it up, and then he said, "Oh, Wendy, you are so right. That's just the right state." And
Yeah, I
another,
can imagine proportionally it would look fantastic, particularly with the three pavilions. And it would, and particularly also you said the galvanized downpipes, like this lovely expression of how this house deals with water is really beautiful.
Yes, and in fact, when we negotiated with all the neighbours about the fence, we said, "Oh, we'll take the side with the steel pipes exposed." It's actually contributed to the whole, but they all thought we were being really nice, giving them the pretty side of the fence.
You're like, no, this works with our palette.
But we did, and we've found so far that there've been swings and roundabouts because most of the suppliers have stuck pretty closely to their original bid. But we've had things like the windows really go in our favour, and we went from veneer to solid core doors. And Eugene, who's one of the other owners in the company, had overestimated the door costs, so that came in within budget. That upgrade.
Yeah.
So no, it's but it really was. We just in the end decided it was worth paying for the quality. And Wendy, who helped us evaluate them, kept on saying the whole way through the process, she said, "Look, choose a builder that really cares about their reputation. That's
good advice.
That's the main thing." And I think in terms of home method and we did use your builder's checklist all the way through too. And oddly enough, the only person that had heard of you was the ex-volume builder, because we walked in and we said, "Oh, we've got this checklist with us," and he said, "Oh, yeah, don't put the sink in the island bench."
But that's what Undercover Architect is known as.
So that was quite funny. But it was really that criterion of are we going to trust them? Because I suspect our costs would have landed roughly in the same ballpark by the end anyway. So
and with a fixed price contract, as you know, if the builder's running into any problems, his first approach is to cut a corner somewhere in material or time or quality, whereas on a cost plus contract, it's a shared problem. And you get to decide how to address that problem.
And they were very clear on they would work, as close to budget as possible, their fees fixed for a certain period of time. But they said, but the time it takes to do the quality job will be the time it takes to do the quality job. We've sort of got an incentive to be efficient, but we're not going to take less time than we need.
Gotcha.
That was reassuring to us because we're lucky enough to be able to stay here till we're ready.
Yeah, well, when you're back next time, I'd love to dive more into that whole contract, because it sounds like you've had an unusually good experience of a cost plus contract. And in my experience, they go pear-shaped more often than they don't. And so I will look forward to unpacking that more, because I think that there's some secrets in how you've navigated that, that we can unpack to set up success in that cost plus contract, not only in how the builder selection worked and the builder's performance, but also in how you worked through preparing for your contract and your construction phase as well. So yeah, I look forward to diving into that in more detail, because I think there's still people who really believe that the cost plus contract is the way to go, and for all the reasons that you outline. However, for most people, it doesn't go well, and it ends up being kind of a bit above a bottomless pit of just having to pay, whatever it's going to cost. So, and they're wearing all the risk.
And we've had friends who've had that experience for sure. So, we'll be interesting to talk about that. And I've done a lot of big projects in IT areas, and the motto there is they always make money on the change requests. So, so that was one of the reasons we kind of went the way we did.
Now, before we wrap up, I'd just love to know, you spoke right at the beginning about the reason that you joined Home Method was that you said, I didn't think that there'd be more behind the paywall after listening to the podcast avidly, and then there was more behind the paywall. And I know that that's the experience that a lot of people think about the podcast, because the podcast does go very comprehensively into a lot of information. Yeah. And it's always been my commitment to be generous with it, because this is, for me, just far too important, people navigating this blindly and not having good quality information. So, but I do love that people, for all sorts of reasons, make the decision to dive into Home Method, and we, can work more closely together there. How has that being part of Home Method and that education process and the preparation, you feel, helped you with your project in terms of decision making and identifying cost savings and time savings and those kinds of things?
Look, I think we certainly used all the checklists, and I consistently always listen to the podcast, and Ed not as much. So we could go through the videos when we needed together. And just some of it written down in a different way. That there's just like a wealth of detail there that helps you navigate it. And I think also having access to you is just that safety, that safety blanket. Just sort of as another opinion. And I think what it did at the heart of things is prepare us to be good clients. And I think that's 3/4 of the battle. And things like Wendy, when she did her quote, gave us a list of, and here's the other professionals you'll need as consultants. And I was ready for that conversation because I'd read the Undercover architect material and thought, oh yes, that's right. She talked about assembling your team a lot, and she was just saying, and this is the team you'll need for this stage. And just to check things like what we went through, what did we go through the other day? Because there was something where we were just a bit uncertain, and we just dove back into, maybe it was interior design. It was something we thought, oh, we're just got to be prepared for that conversation. We could just go and look up all that content in one place and find it. It's been a absolutely worthwhile resource. And as I said, we made the decision because I thought, well, Amelia can't not get paid in all of this contribution. And then there was, this is really good.
I'm glad that it was, because I'm not a charity, but it's really, it's really great. It's very kind that you were thinking about that as an exchange of value. So, and I'm glad that Home Method has delivered beyond that for you. So,
oh no, it was. It absolutely was.
The resource we used was a book called Nail It by Adam Hobel.
Yes. Yeah, I'm familiar with that book. Yeah.
So he's a local, and he'd been involved with the house our friends had built on the other side of the circuit, but he also was the building designer for the house next to us, which was the other half of the duplex. So it's all, Canberra's a small town.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Look at where On's pretty well had every architect in Canberra have a go at it, because it's one of it's been redeveloped, because big blocks with poorly designed houses on it. And and we did, I don't know if we said, reused all the bricks from the knockdown rebuild. So,
actually tell me a little bit about that.
So that's, so the small house that was on it was a built in the 1940s. And so, and it was painted white on the outside, but it had Canberra reds. So because it was double brick, they went quite a long way, and we did supplement them with other Canberra reds. But they look really lovely. And there was that whole nerve-wracking moment of we decided to recycle the bricks, and I thought, oh, I really hope I like them when I see them without all the paint on them. But supplying our own bricks, it cost us $1 a brick, and it would have cost us $3 a brick to buy them.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So that was really nice. And we've actually got a couple of features on the house where they turn the stamp round so you can see the manufacturing, and they look really lovely with the spotted pine. So we're very
spotted gum. Yeah.
Spotted gum. We're very pleased with how that turned out.
And then
I'm so glad.
The terracotta tiles on the house have been recycled or gone back into the Canberra building industry because terracotta tiles
they're
are
hard
popular.
to find.
And then the roof timbers, which are good hardwood from the 40s, have gone off to Thor's Hammer, which is a local bespoke joinery. So they'll turn up as dining tables.
Yes. And the tree we got rid of and the fruit trees have all gone to the Canberra Woodworking Guild. So we felt like
what amazing contribution that's all made. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that was really nice. And something we didn't say about the design brief at the very beginning was we wanted the house to look a bit like it had always been there and sort of have a Burley Griffin vibe. And so that's being able to reuse the bricks and everything else has helped with that.
We certainly don't like the way you can drive around suburbs and say, yes, that's a 1998 design, that's a 2016 design, that's a 2022 design. There's just such a trend in design that you can track. We didn't want that. And I think Wendy's done a pretty good job of making it, as Fiona says, more timeless and sympathetic with the environment. So, touch wood.
Yeah. Oh, it's just so lovely to chat to you and hear how you've approached this whole project and the way that so many different elements of your goals have threaded through how this house is turning out, both functionally, aesthetically, pragmatically. It's just it's a joy to hear how it's been for you as an experience, and I can't wait to obviously see, it all finished and also to get you back to chat more about the construction. Did you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so, other than your podcast has been just so, and the home method has just been so helpful in terms of us formulating our thoughts and knowing what to expect. And I guess even in terms of setting a reasonable budget and all those sorts of things, it's really made an incredible difference to the certainty we've had in this whole project.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear, and thank you so much for that feedback. And now you get to be one of the voices providing help to other people on the podcast as well. So it's so generous of you to be here. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing this part of your journey. And I'm really looking forward to getting you back and talking more about construction and how that's been for you, because I know that will be super helpful for others. But thanks so much, Fiona and Ed, for your time. It's been really great to have you here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.